Hello and welcome to my kitchen. I'm Judith, and today I'm going to make some beef vegetable soup. So I have 750 grams of soup bone and 650 grams of oxtail. So first thing we have to do is put those in the oven and roast them off a little bit. So let's put these into a pan. And these will be the basis for our stock. So we want to just give them a light sprinkling with some salt and pepper. That'll rub in. Okay, we're going to heat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we're going to put our beef into the oven and let it roast probably about half an hour just to get things warmed up and browned so we get a nice color to our broth. Now that we've got our soup bones and oxtails roasted, we are going to move them into a Dutch oven. You're going to want a fairly big one. Actually, you're going to want a really huge one. And we're going to pour in any of the juices that also collected. And this is going to be our beef stock, so we want a couple of nice bay leaves. Now, if you got a really huge one, just one. And pour in water, and probably let's see, about 2 liters of water, a little less maybe, but not much less. We will be adding more liquid, specifically tomato, but let's get our stock on the stove and get it simmering. We'll bring this up to a boil and turn the temperature down so that it will simmer. Probably 2 to 3 hours. We will be turning especially the big soup bone over to make sure everything gets a nice little simmer. And we will check that later. One other thing we have to do is boil our beans. This is a 1/4 cup of dried navy beans, which I have soaked overnight. And there's 2 reasons for boiling them first before we put them into soup. Main one, because they're not going to be cooking long enough in the soup to actually get soft. The other one is that once you boil them and then rinse them and then add them to soup, the boiling will help remove the chemical that gives you gas. And nobody wants gas. So I've drained off the water. You definitely don't want to boil them in the water that you soak them in. I'm going to add enough water so there's about 1 inch above the top of the beans. Then we're going to cover them, bring them up to a boil, and let them cook for about 3/4 of an hour. So the other main ingredient for our stock is going to be tomato. Now it's up to you whether you use fresh tomatoes, but if you do, make sure you peel them, because nothing like biting into a piece of tomato peel in your soup. It's not really chewable. Or you can use canned tomatoes, tomato paste, or strained tomatoes. So I'm going to use a combination of strained tomatoes and canned tomatoes, because I do want some of the chunkies, and I want to save my fresh tomatoes for later. And as to vegetables, you can use many things. I've got some green beans. We're going to put in some onion, celery, kale. You could use cabbage, zucchini. Definitely want to use some carrot, purple top turnip. You could use some butternut squash, potato, just about anything. So this is going to turn out something like a minestrone, because we are going to add some of the little pastas. And I'll show you those when we get to them. After about 3/4 of an hour or so, check your beans. Just get a bean out of there. Well, don't forget they're going to be hot. So you may just want to drop it on the counter, but give it a little squeeze between your fingers. There we go, it broke. Okay, it's not fully cooked, but that's okay. We don't want it fully cooked. It still has to cook more in the soup. But it is getting to about the stage we want it to be. It will have long enough now in the soup to cook completely. So we're going to strain off the water. And we're just going to set our beans aside for now, because they are going to go into the soup when we add the vegetables. Our broth has been simmering for about 2 hours, not much more, maybe 2 hours and a few minutes. The longer you can let your broth simmer, the better. You will get more flavor. The meat will be tenderer. So now we're going to pull everything out. Oops. And we're going to pull everything out carefully. There we go. And just put that aside for a minute. And we want to strain our broth, because we do need the pot back, unless you have another pot the same size, because we have to clean the pot. So we're going to bring in a bowl and a strainer, and we're going to pour our broth through. It's just a fine mesh strainer. There we go. And that will remove a lot of the debris and, of course, our bay leaf, which is okay because we can add more. Now we're just going to clean our pot and get started on the next step, because we need the pot back. Unless you have another pot the same size or bigger, because this is going to make a lot of soup. So we need the big pot. Now that we've strained out our beef stock, we are going to saute our vegetables, and I have added to the cleaned pot some oil and about 2 cups of celery, 1.5 cups of a yellow onion, a cup of carrot, a cup of purple top turnip, all diced. Fairly small. This is a soup, not a stew. So we're going to let these cook a little. We want the onions to get translucent and lovely and add flavor. A little pinch of salt, and we're going to add a bay leaf, a small one. So we had a bay leaf in our stock. And some thyme. Find the thyme. Let me find the thyme. So it's up to you how much you add here. I like thyme, so I'm adding a generous, that's probably 1/4 teaspoon. Not a lot, but it's dried, so it has a stronger flavor. Now when you're happy with the vegetables, pour in the beef stock and the tomatoes. I have a can of Plum Tomatoes, Italian whole peeled. This is a brand I've never used before, and it's very thick. Most tomatoes are watery, but it looks good. If you're using a canned tomato, make sure you cut them up. You know, I use a knife to just go through the can and chop them. Or with your own hands, go in and squeeze. And then I'm just going to rinse the can out with some water. Why waste what tomatoes left in the can? And we're going to bring that back up to a boil. I'm going to add the beans that we pre-cooked and our diced potato. Now, as I've mentioned before, I always put my potato in water just to keep it from discoloring. And you can actually use that water that the potatoes were in to put in your soup. It does have a little bit of nutrient, it has a little bit of starch, it can help thicken. I'm going to bring it up to a boil and let it simmer for a bit before I add the rest of my vegetables. Okay, while that's coming to a boil, we have a couple of things to do. You need to strip the meat off the bones and separate that so it can go in the soup. And oxtail, yeah, there's a lot of little crevices. Just strip everything off the bones that you can. I mean, the bones that have lots of extra left in, they can go back in the soup and help with the flavor, which I will do as soon as I get the meat off, or the main part of the meat off, because we want to cut that up. But we also have to cut our kale. If you're putting any sort of leafy green vegetable in your soup, you need to put that in at pretty much the last minute. So I'm going to return my bones because they do still have some flavor in there. Like, there's still a lot of meat bits and fat. So that's going back in the soup. We can fish the bones out when we serve. Before we chop our meat up, we do have to deal with our kale. Now, you could use cabbage, spinach, or anything else, but for me, kale is one of those vegetables that it's hardier. It takes longer to break down when you're cooking it, so I think it goes better in a soup or a stew. Just cut the rib out. We can get to it. Yeah, just, hello. No rib. We don't want the rib. Find the rib in there between all those lovely little fluffy leaves. And I think that's about 4 cups of kale. Just cut the ribs out and chop it a little bit and throw it in at the end. It only needs a few minutes to cook. So when your vegetables that you've already put in are mostly cooked, add the softer vegetables. And I got some butternut squash and green beans. And everything's rolling away. It is lovely. Okay, so now we want to add our pasta. And this is about 1/3 of a cup of ziti, which is you can see it there, a small kind of macaroni pasta. So you want to add that in, give it a good stir. And put the lid back on. We need to cook this at least another 15-20 minutes. Now while that is cooking, we are going to chop up our meat. This is all the meat that we stripped off our soup bones and our oxtails. Okay, so we have a lot of beef here to put in our soup. It's going to be a very beefy soup. Before you want to add your soft vegetable, like your kale or cabbage or whatever, you are going to want to add your beef in. So once everything is happy and boiling and most of your vegetables are softening, although don't wait till they're already cooked, add the beef in. Now, I told you this is going to make a big, thick pot of soup. You may need to add some more water if it's too thick. Yeah, I think I'm going to pour in a couple of cups of water. I am going to add some water. And it's like a cup, maybe a cup and a half or 2 cups. Just enough to make this more of a soup. Of course, when you pull the bones out, that is going to thin it out quite a bit. The bones are taking up quite a bit of space in here. We need to let the beans and the butternut squash cook. Butternut squash is fine. The bean is doing well. The white beans are fine. The one thing I'm not seeing is my pasta. I need to know how the pasta is. Oh, there's one. Let's see how that's doing. So all we want is just that little piece of pasta. Still a little bit underdone. So we'll wait for a minute before we add our kale. Time to see how we're doing. Soup has been simmering. Vegetables cooking. Oh, yeah, perfection with that. So now we're going to put in our kale, or whatever other leafy green vegetable that you've chosen to use, because this you don't want to cook too much. It won't take long. And give it a good stir in. Don't forget, there's a lot more space in there than it looks like because there's a lot of bone in there yet. So I just let that have a few minutes to cook, and then it's going to be dinner time or lunch time or whatever time it is that you chose to cook this for. So let's cover it up and give it a few more minutes. I think we should be cooked by now. So let's take our lid off. Looks delicious, and it's very thick and very hearty. Okay, we want to give it a taste to make sure there's enough salt in it. But at this point it doesn't really matter because you add salt and pepper at the table. Delicious. Okay, we turn the heat off. Let's serve it up. Okay, let's have dinner. We have our beef vegetable soup. Let's give it a taste here. I'm going to taste the broth. Oh, that is fabulous. That is lovely. Beefy and tomatoey. Okay. And the kale isn't cooked to mush. So let's try a few of the vegetables here. What have we got? So good. You could almost call it minestrone. There's very little difference between this and minestrone. Please, if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. Please give it a like. If you've gotten this far into the video, you obviously enjoyed it. So give it a like. Everything, every like, every subscribe, every share that you give me really helps my channel. And I'm still working hard to get my channel up there and out there. And so thank you so much. I want to hear what you want to say. Was there something I did that you really enjoyed or that you think I should have done better? Let me know. I am going to enjoy my soup. And I hope you do too. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon with a new video.